Hello, everybody, and welcome back. It is our favorite time of the year. Slade and I are here to begin our college football season preview for the 2023 season. College football is we've said it before, we'll say it every time. This is one of our favorite sports to watch year in, year out. And I think the 2023 season is going to be a memorable one, even better than what 2022 was. There's a lot of changes coming in the horizon for 2024, but also this season as well. So we're gonna make sure we get you guys ready with all of that stuff. And as always, like we did last season, we're gonna break down every conference individually. Today we're gonna do group of five conferences. We're gonna break down all five today in one episode, and then from here on out, the Power Fives will get their own episode individually. But I mean, there's still a lot to talk about here. With a group of five schools, you have the American, you have the Conference USA, you have the Sun Belt, you have Mountain West, and you have the MAC Conference. And we're going to talk about each and every one of them. uh, Before we get into the individual conferences, let's talk about some of the schools that have moved around. We have three schools that left the group of five altogether, leaving the American Conference. That is Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF. They are all going over and joining the Big 12. Joining the American Conference from Conference USA, we have Charlotte, FAU, North Texas, Rice, UAB, and UTSA. So the Conference USA is losing a lot, but as we're going to talk about here in a minute, I feel like they've done a nice job replacing what they have lost. There's still a lot to talk on the horizon about some schools possibly leaving the Mountain West, heading to the Pac-12. Not exactly sure what's shaking out in that situation yet. But the teams joining Conference USA this year are Liberty, New Mexico State, Jacksonville State, and Sam Houston State. Jacksonville and Sam Houston are coming up from FCS, and Liberty and New Mexico State are joining from the Independent League. And so this will be Liberty's first time being in a conference at all since they joined FBS. And New Mexico State hasn't been in a conference since 2017. Um, and so, I just want to get your opinion real quick. Who do you think is the biggest move there? Obviously, we know the big three leaving. We're going to talk about those with the Big 12 in a couple weeks. But joining, who would you say, in your opinion, is probably the biggest mover that you see, or the team you're most excited to see in a new conference?
Yeah, I mean, I think UTSA had a great season last year, and then moving over is going to be a big change for them. But I also think that it's a great change. It's a chance for them to kind of go from being one of those top teams in the CUSA to coming over and literally being able to hit the ground running and being able to compete over um, in the American League. That was the big one that I had thought about. I gotta say that the next few years until like 2026, I'm assuming that these conference changes are going to continue to happen for the next like 3-4 years, just with contracts ending and stuff like that. It's going to be really confusing to really be able to track. But yeah, I think UTSA. I was really big on Northern Texas at the end of the year last year, just because I was just trying to go with every Texas team. But yeah, I think that both those teams going over are a great addition to the American League.
Yeah, I think North Texas, along with UTSA, is going to be a lot of fun to watch there. Obviously, North Texas lost to UTSA in the Conference USA championship game last season, um, and we're going to talk about that more here in a little bit. The team I'm most looking forward to is actually UAB also joining the American Conference again. Another team that has looked really good here ever since they reinstated their program just a few years ago. They've played really well in Conference USA. They've won a few titles there. They made the title game a few times on top of that as well. And so if they can kind of get that program back to where it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I know they have a new head coach, Trent Dilfer, going in there. Obviously, I think there was a lot of questions around that team. They had their head coach had to step away suddenly just before the season started. And as unfortunate as that is, that always is going to set your program behind the eight ball. And you could tell they just couldn't get any momentum together. But a full off season under Trent Dilfer, a former Super Bowl winning quarterback. He's also done really good things at high school so far. So it'll be interesting to see if he can translate that to the college game. We're going to know very quickly in a few games for them, but they have a couple games on their schedule where if they are clicking, if they're playing well, they can upset some really good teams. So UAB is going to be a lot of fun to watch in that conference as well. Um, Obviously, the other big thing that we're going to talk about with the group of five is the team that's going to make it into the New Year's Six Bowl. Last year we had Tulane make it, and then they upset USC. Before that, we had Cincinnati make. So obviously, the last few years, the team that makes a New Year's Six bowl has come from the American. Um, but who do you have picked this year as your New Year's Six Cinderella coming from the group of five teams?
Um, yeah, so I kind of have uh Tulane. I feel like is a good choice. Just because they had a great season last year, if they're able to kind of keep that momentum going. I think UTSA in having a really great season last year is also another great choice. But now they're going to be going against a team like Tulane. So, well, at some point, right? Um,
Yeah,
so I think that it might be a little bit more difficult for either of those teams to make it in, or they might give themselves a better opportunity, kind of um, lesser quality version of like what we see with Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, in that there's a chance for two of those three teams to get in, even if only one of them are making it. So I don't know that we see. I don't know. I'm a sleeper pick with CUSA. I'm Middle Tennessee. I think that that's the team that they ended hot last year. I think that they could really shock some people. What are your
yeah. I
thoughts?
mean, it's not a terrible pick. Um, Personally, I think I'm going to stick with Tulane just because of the season that they had last year. Now they do have a rough start to the schedule. They play South Alabama, who had an incredible year last year, and their Power Five school this year is going to be Ole Miss. Obviously, you know what Lane Kiffin can do at Ole Miss early in the season. But if you look back to last year, if they were able to flip two of those games, I mean, you could make arguments that Tulane belonged in the playoff. They beat a Power Five school, and not just any Power Five school. It was Kansas State who went on to win the Big 12 championship. They lost a tight game, or early in the season to UCF. They avenged that to win the conference title. But I mean, they had this schedule last year that if they were able to get a little bit more magic and a couple more breaks here and there, we could have been talking about them in a sense of being snubbed from the playoffs rather than just making a New Year's Six bowl. But I think with the talent they're bringing back, and I'm going to talk about them more here in a minute. The talent they're bringing back and just the momentum they have behind them after last season and upsetting USC at the Cotton Bowl, and not just any USC. This is a Heisman winner. Caleb Williams was playing. They weren't resting people, and they were able to pull off a heck of a comeback and win that game. I'm going to stick with Tulane as
I,
my New Year's Six pick.
I need to retract my Middle Tennessee. I was looking at my notes wrong and did not realize that they start out against Alabama and then Missouri. Yeah, so not Middle Tennessee. uh, but yeah, I was looking at the notes wrong. But yeah, I think
Go
that
ahead.
if you're gonna go with Tulane, I'm gonna go UTSA. I think that the winner of that game there has a really good chance at being able to set themselves up to be the leading group of five, to kind of be the representative. But I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's dive into our individual conference previews, starting with the American. Again, highly touted. They do lose some key schools like Cincinnati and UCF, and Houston has slowly progressed back into a top tier team in that conference. They move over to the Big 12, but I feel like their additions are kind of equal the sums of what left. They added a lot more schools than they lost, and I think those schools that they had, like UTSA, North Texas, UAB, are really good additions to that conference. It's going to keep this. I always called the American, like the Power Six school, the sixth power school, and I think they're going to kind of keep that moniker in my mind, just because overall I think their talent pool is kind of up there, and we've seen American schools upset a lot of Power Five schools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so first things first, who is your winner for the American Conference?
I'm going with Tulane. I don't want it to be Tulane just because you rode the green wave into the ground last season. But I mean, you rode it the entire season and it worked out great until the end, I guess. But I think that Tulane's going to be able to pick up where they dropped it. All the things that you had just listed. I think they're going to be able to bring back that same type of mentality and everything. I do think that UTSA is able to challenge them with this, but I think that Tulane ultimately comes out with the win.
Yeah. I'm going with Tulane as well. Their star QB Michael Pratt returns. He threw for over 3,000 yards last year and 27 touchdowns. They did lose their star running back that really kind of carried that offense in a nice balance, but they did get a nice transfer portal additions there. I think the big thing that helps them on the path to repeating is Cincinnati and UCF both lost. Now, I know they lost to UCF in the regular season, but they did beat Cincinnati, and then again they avenged that loss to UCF. They do have that rough start, like I talked about, a tough game against South Alabama, and they play Ole Miss. The weird thing about that Ole Miss game is that it's actually at home. I'm kind of surprised Ole Miss is going on the road to a Group of Five school, but nonetheless, it's going to be a really interesting game in week 2 to watch. They're also looking to avenge a loss to Southern Miss. They lost that game early in the season as well last year. So, this is a team that it can be, another really good season, kind of 10-2 area, sneak into that New Year's Six bowl. But if they can get a couple breaks to go their way, especially in that Ole Miss game, again, I think this is absolutely a team that we could talk about, with an outside shot at making the playoffs. Um, which team in the conference are you picking as your biggest improvement heading into the 2023 season?
So it's not overall like a big thing. I guess I would say. I mean, I'm gonna go with UAB, and just that I think that they're going to be able to kind of capitalize with this move. It's fresh
Mhm.
start. I have them kind of sitting around that 3-4 mark at the end of the season in the conference, which I think is great for them, seeing as though that they took, I think, 5th in their conference in CUSA last year, just in conference play, So
Mhm.
I think them being able to switch conferences and kind of sit around that 3-4 mark is a big improvement for them. But yeah, that I'm gonna go with UAB. Plus their helmets are sick.
Yeah. No, I think UAB is absolutely a team that, I mean, we just talked about. I think they can surprise a lot of people. I'm just kind of interested to see on if Dilfer can translate his
Mhm.
success at the high school level into this level. We'll see that a couple weeks in, but that's just the one thing I'm kind of waiting to see before I'm fully sold on UAB. My pick this year, I'm going to go with Eastern Carolina. There's a lot of doubt surrounding them because they're not returning any starters on the offensive line, and that is huge. Um, but 3 of their losses last year came to top tier schools in the American. They lost to Cincinnati and Houston, who are now gone. Their other loss was to Tulane. Um, they do have a difficult start to the year, but I think that they're going to be able to bounce back. And if they can get some of those close games that they had last season, one of those was a week 1 loss to North Carolina State, which really, I mean, they should have won. Their kicker just kind of forgot what he was doing, I guess. Um, but I mean, they have SMU and Tulane. They're playing at Eastern Carolina this year. They're at UTSA and at Navy, and I think those are going to be their toughest road games. But
Really,
yeah,
conference?
yeah,
Because okay, in conference, I was gonna say because
yeah.
they start out against Michigan, right?
No, yeah, no, yeah. Like I
Yeah,
said, they have a rough start, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah.
No,
Okay.
I'm not picking them to beat Michigan, and hopefully, if they can make it through that game without a lot of injuries, if they can kind of maybe hang around for a quarter or two and
Mhm.
instill some confidence in that team, that could be a huge boost. Or we can see what happened to Colorado State last year, who had a decent team around them. They went up there to Ann Arbor, they got beat up and it hurt, and just dismantled, and they kind of just flattened out their whole season. But yeah, in
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
conference,
I
those are their
understand what you're
toughest
saying.
road
Sorry.
games. Um, but I think they're getting enough transfers in, and also Coach Houston is building a really good program ever since he joined there. I believe he's going to his 5th year now. He is, um, and so I think he has enough of a culture there, and enough, kind of a established format for his team that he can bring these new transfers in. He can instill that next man up mentality. I think Eastern Carolina is gonna be fine if they can just make it through this first couple weeks. Michigan, Marshall, and Appalachian State, 3 very tough games to start with. But luckily they get Gardner Webb and Rice as their next 2 games. So I don't mean to downplay those games at all, but if you're going to play any 2 teams after, a tough 3-game opening schedule like that, an FCS school and Rice are 2 teams I would want to play. Um, who do you have as your biggest disappointment this year, or your most a team that you think is going to decline a lot from what you saw last year in the American?
So I'm gonna go with this as in like they're gonna be a big disappointment this year. It's gonna kind
Mhm.
of mimic last year, but um, I think USF is just gonna have another like 1-11 season or whatever the
Mhm.
deal is. I think that it's gonna be tough for them to change any of what happened last year. Maybe a game or two, but I mean 2-10, 1-11. It's not good. Um, One of the good things that is coming for them, I'll talk about here in a couple of minutes with the stadium and stuff like that. But uh, yeah, I mean, they ended the season on a 10-game losing streak, which is just really, really rough. So, I mean, they lost week 1, won the second week, and then lost the next 10 games of the season, which is it just has to be super demoralizing and just disappointing for everybody involved because uh, even if you know you're going to a school like the guys that were recruited in before last year that'll be playing this season on USF, you sat as a red shirt or whatever last year and you watch the team happen like that and you're just hoping that this season isn't the same. But
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have drastic changes for for something like that to change. So what are your thoughts?
The team I picked is SMU. I don't think SMU is going to be bad, and I'm looking at this in the sense of I think a lot of people are picking them to be a team that can compete for the conference championship. I don't think they're quite there yet. I think that I mean their biggest loss is Tanner Mordecai, who transfers over to Wisconsin. Uh, the absolute star QB, and I understand that they're Preston Stone who's going to be taking over this year. Got reps last year, did play. I think that offense overall takes a step back. I mean, they had one of the best offenses in the country, 12th in scoring, 7th overall in passing offense. Uh, it's hard to replace a guy like Mordecai in the heart and soul he was of that offense. I mean, you think of some of those games they played last year. The Houston one is obviously the one that sticks out, 77-63. I remember watching college football on that Saturday, and every 5 minutes they were cutting in saying, "Okay, there's another touchdown in this game." Um, and so I think overall the offensive production takes kind of a step back. Um, and they do have difficult. So they play Oklahoma, TCU, Eastern Carolina, and Memphis, all on the road. I think those are very difficult road games. They also play Louisiana Tech, who I think is going to be a very good team out of the Conference USA. So not a lot of like easy breaks for this team. And if that offense isn't clicking, especially right from the beginning, I mean, I understand Oklahoma might not be what we're used to seeing out of them, especially after last season.
Mm.
Um, if they're unable to get their offense clicking early in those games, it's going to be difficult to do it once we get farther into the season. And so I'm not saying this is going to be a team that misses a bowl game or anything. I just don't think they're going to be up there competing for the conference title like I feel like a lot of people are picking them to do. Do you have one team within the American Conference that we didn't talk about here that just kind of intrigues you? Any storylines from the offseason that you want to talk about or anything?
Um, I mean, I think that you touched really good on ECU and their losses being against two teams that are leaving, and that being a great opportunity. And so that was the only thing that I was going to possibly bring up, but you explained it greatly.
Yeah. So let's move over to Conference USA. And again, we talked about all the teams that left. They bring 4 new ones in. Um, who are you taking as your winner of Conference USA this year?
So for the Conference USA, I am going with MTSU on this one because of it being in conference. I think that they're going to open the season up with 2 butt whoopings, and then they're going to have a chance to hit the ground running. They really ended the season hot last year. I think they have ended on a 4-game winning streak. So I think that it's going to be a rough start, but I think the team is kind of used to that winning nature after ending the last third of the season last year with wins and just really ending on a great note going into the summertime. Obviously, you can plan as much as you want, but when you're going up against Alabama as your first game, you just kind of have to use that as a practice. Make sure that everyone knows like what they're supposed to be doing. This is your first opportunity to play uh, live against another team that doesn't know what's going on. It's not
Yeah.
your team doing first offense against first defense. It's like complete difference. So I think it'll be a great tune-up game for them. And Alabama. But but yeah, I think that it'll give them a chance to kind of play. I think it honestly will give them a better chance to play against Missouri that second week. Then they might be able to get it a little closer. But we'll see. Landon's disagreeing with me, but we'll see.
Um, I'm going to go with Western Kentucky. Just back to Middle Tennessee State here, real quick. And I'm going to talk about them more here in a little bit. And mainly looking at that Alabama matchup, we saw them play Alabama play Utah State last year and just completely dismantle them. And Utah State got super banked up, and they took what was supposed to be, another high caliber season competing for the Mountain West, and they just kind of fell flat the rest of the season because they had so many injuries to try and overcome from that game. So with Middle Tennessee State, obviously neither one of us are predicting them to upset Alabama, but if they're able to make it through that game, let's score a couple touchdowns. Alabama's defense is what they pride themselves on every season. Hey, let's go out there. Let's put some points up. Let's stay healthy mainly. And if we can make it through there, Missouri isn't the cream of the crop in the SEC. They're definitely improving. But, if that's, I mean, we saw them go out, Middle Tennessee State go out and beat Miami last year. Maybe they can go out there, hang with Missouri, like you just said, possibly even pull off a win. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Um, as far as my winner, I'm going to go with Western Kentucky. Austin Reed returns, and this offense year in year out is always 1 and 2, or at least top five in passing efficiency and passing yards and all this other stuff. He threw for 4,744 yards last year. So obviously, their passing offense is they love the air raid over there. If he can just be a little bit more consistent, he had 11 interceptions last year. If he can limit those turnovers, but also just kind of make a little bit better reads and mature as a quarterback, I think Western Kentucky is going to have an absolutely fantastic season. Excuse me. Um, they do have a rough start to the season. They go to Ohio State and to Troy. The Ohio State one is obviously going to be very difficult, but Troy is a game that they can win. They just need to play smart, be healthy, and if they can make it through there 1-1, I think that they're off to the races once they get to conference play. They have a very favorable schedule, and I think, like I said, if they can just stay healthy, get through that Ohio State game, I think that they are absolutely just primed and ready to win the conference again. Um, who do you have as your biggest improvement in the conference?
I think Liberty. I think Liberty joining in here is going to be great for them. I mean, they had a solid season last year, and now they're kind of joining what I would consider is a lesser version of what the Conference USA was last year.
Mhm.
In terms of their uh, I don't know, plethora of teams, or I guess however you would say it. But I think that them being able to, I think there were like 8-4, 9-3, something like that last year. Kind of a pretty decent season. As an independent, playing against teams that uh, are kind of all over, in terms of style of offense and defense, just different things. I mean, you're just playing everyone. I think them playing in the Conference USA is going to be a great opportunity for them, and I have them as second in the conference at the end of the year. So yeah, I think that this is going to be a great opportunity for them.
Absolutely. My biggest improvement in Conference USA, I'm going to go with Louisiana Tech. They went 3-9 last year, 2-6 in the conference. A lot of those losses have now left. Last year they lost to North Texas, Rice, UTSA, Charlotte, and UAB. So all schools that are no longer in that conference. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that they're automatically going to beat the teams replacing them, but I think overall, the, um, they get a new QB in, and Hank Bachmeier. He transferred in from Boise State. Hopefully, he can get some consistency on that offense. They can put up a couple more points. They also lost a lot of really close games last year. Rice and FAU both went into overtime. They had another game that was a one possession game. The defense last year was ranked 128th in the country in scoring, 130th in rushing. So if they can just minor improvements, if they can get
Mm-hmm.
inside the top 100 on defense, this is a team that can definitely win more than 3 games this season. I think they can get up there, maybe even get bowl eligible this year. They do have a rough schedule. They go to SMU. They have North Texas at home, but they also travel to Nebraska. Um, so definitely the makings of a rough start to the season. They also travel to Middle Tennessee State, but excuse me, and Liberty, but they get Sam Houston at home and Western Kentucky at home. So favorable
Mm-hmm.
matchups there. Um, Not picking them to win the conference by any stretch of the imagination, but this is definitely a team I think that can get back to bowl eligibility this year. Who do you have as your most declined team or your biggest disappointment in Conference USA?
Going with Jacksonville State. I think that them getting into the conference and everything is going to be great down the road.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think that they just got their team slaughtered, basically. I mean, everyone and their mother that went to the team in the last 2 years left. So, I mean, it would be like, who'd you say it was? Utah State that got really injured? Yeah. So, I mean, it would be like you're in, I don't know, like, let's say 14 of your starters from offense and defense getting injured and being out for the season, you having to play with backups in all of those positions, you know? Now, obviously, with recruiting and stuff like that, redshirt freshmen from last year, everyone that is going to get their opportunities this year, that might be different. I could be wrong, but I just think when you lose that many guys from the team, you lose the head coach. It's you got to start from fresh, and I think that that's where the coach has to start with. So that's why I think that this season might kind of be lackluster for them.
Absolutely. Here's where I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. So I actually put Middle Tennessee State here as my biggest disappointment in the conference. I think just with the way that their schedule starts, traveling to Alabama and Missouri, they also travel to Western Kentucky. They have Colorado State. Luckily, that's at home, but I think Colorado State is going to be a much improved school to play against. Last year, I feel like that Miami win just sparked a lot of confidence and kind of carried them to a few extra wins. I don't see a big time win coming like that. And they also travel to Liberty as well and New Mexico State, who I'm going to talk about here in a minute. So I don't see them, like you said, you're kind of picking them to win the conference maybe. I'm going to say they're going to kind of finish middle of the pack and just be not a terrible year, but definitely a down year from what I feel like you and other people are expecting out of it. Who's one team in the conference that you want to talk about that we haven't yet?
I had just kind of gone again with Jacksonville State, and that it's. I think that it's really going to be a tough go around this year. I think that if they go in expecting that, if they're not, getting down on themselves, realizing that like they're going to be in a growing and building period right now. They have to. I think Coach Prime, when he was there, had talked about the culture and everything like that. They have to change the culture of kind of the stigma that's probably been going around there for months since Dion left. I mean, he left. What?
So Dion was at Jackson State.
Oh, jeez. Jesus.
I was with you. All of a sudden, you started talking about Dion. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, then no. But Jackson State's gonna be rough off this year. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. The team I'm going to talk about is New Mexico State. I mean, I was pretty high on the Aggies towards the end of last year. They made it a bowl for the first time since 2017. And I think Jerry Kill, who I feel like doing solid things at Minnesota before his health concerns came in and he had to step away. And then they brought in Mr. Row the Boat and kind of got shafted out of a job at Minnesota. He returned to Mexico State with passion. He's the man for this job, and he showed that last year, getting them the 5 wins. They had the waiver to be able to play Valparaiso to get that win to count so they could make a bowl. But, I don't think anybody expected them to win that bowl game, and they showed up and they dominated that game. So they have actually, I feel like a pretty decent schedule to start. It's very possible that they are 6-1 in mid-October and bowl eligible already. I mean, now, granted, that's a lot of things need to go their way and be right. But I think this is a team that we're not going to see like in the past, make a bowl game and then disappear for 5 years. I think Coach Kill is going to have this team consistent, competing for bowls, and then maybe in a few years competing for the conference title. So I'm really excited to see where New Mexico State ends up in a few years. And I think this year is going to be a huge step for them, to get up there. Next conference up is going to be the MAC. The MAC is one of my favorite conferences. I love Tuesday night football. So God bless the MAC for giving that to us. And also year in, year out, it's the craziest conference. Whoever you think is going to do really well tends to suck. Everything's going to suck, ends up winning. Everybody's 6-6. And the 2 teams playing for the conference championship had to get in on like 6 tiebreakers. So I love the MAC, and I'm super excited to preview it. First things first, who do you have winning the MAC this year, Slade?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is a wild pick or not, but I have Eastern Michigan winning. I think that them ending this last season on a 4-game win streak, kind of like I talked about with previous team. There we go. Perfect. I didn't get the match. I have that same shirt. But yeah, I think them ending the season on a 4-game win streak is going to be able to give them that kind of momentum going into next season. And I think that really, if they're able to build on that, it might be hard to stop them, especially because looking at their schedule, I mean, the week 2 against Minnesota, that's definitely will be a tough matchup for them. But they're going to be uh, also away against Toledo, which is later in the season, so it'll give them time to kind of be like they're either. I think they're going to be an all or nothing team. I think they're going to be all like they're going to be first in conference, or they're going to be like an 8-4 team. So what are your thoughts?
I actually like that Eastern Michigan pick, but I'm going to go with Ohio. I think they're returning so much on offense. Sam, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that last name, but is returning at quarterback. They won 7 straight games last year before they lost the conference championship game to Toledo. So I think that they're going to be out for blood a little bit. Now they do have a somewhat difficult schedule. They travel to San Diego State, who is always a hit or miss team, um, and it's going to be a lot of fun there. But they also get Iowa State at home, which I found very surprising. Like I said earlier, it's weird for a Power Five school to travel to a Group of Five school. The fact a Big 12 team is traveling to a MAC team I find absolutely wild.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in conference, I think they have a pretty generous schedule. I think the toughest game is going to be traveling to Buffalo. Buffalo is the team that finished second last year. They're going to be hungry as well. But Ohio hasn't won the MAC since 1968. They are desperate to end that, and I think this is the year that they do it. Who do you have as your most improved team in the MAC?
I went with Kent State. I think that they were a rush powerhouse last year. They had the most rushing yards average of all teams in the MAC, and I think that if they're just able to get some defense going on that team, that I mean, they could just continue to run the ball all over everyone and just I think they averaged over like 200 some yards a game. I mean, it's really I think that they need to just adopt it that they need to be a rush powerhouse and that
Mhm.
they just need to get everything else to kind of fall in line. So then you just start focusing on maybe more of the defense. But yeah, that's I went with Kent State.
I went with Northern Illinois. They went 3-9 and 2-6 in the conference last year. Um, they had a brutal non-conference schedule, and the wheels just kind of came off. They were beat up a lot. And then throughout the season, the injuries just seemed to pile up on top of that. If they can get someone healthy, and they do have a little bit easier schedule, I think that they could be competing for a bowl game again. And who knows? And like I said earlier, with as crazy as the MAC is, everybody might be 6-6, and who knows? Maybe they can sneak their way back into the title game. They won the conference just 2 years ago, and then they turned around last year. They go 3-9, 2-6. So I mean, the pedigree is there. Last year they played at Tulsa. They had Vanderbilt at home. They went to Kentucky and then to Ball State. This year they opened at Boston College, which I'm not expecting big things out of. So a winnable Power Five game there. But they also traveled to Nebraska as well. So, but I mean they're not playing Kentucky again, who was ranked 8th when they played them last year. So a little bit more favorable and generous. So hope they can get a couple more bounces their way
Hmm.
and end up with a win. Who do you have as your most disappointing or team that's going to take a regression this year?
Yeah, so regression, I actually went opposite of you. I went with Ohio. I think that they were so close, and like you said, they're so desperate for that MAC championship. I think that they're going to be so desperate that they end up losing a critical game against Buffalo, and it just makes it unable. It would just make it unable for them to replicate last season if they lose to Buffalo. I feel so. I think that along with being so close and not getting the MAC championship, I think that those two things would be a regression for them, and I think that they would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, for me, I went with Bowling Green. They get Connor Basilic from Indiana transferring in. I think the schedule and their tendency to play close games. They won, I think, 4 games that were within 10 points last year. Um, I think just with how difficult their schedule is for them this season, and kind of having while you do have a good transfer coming in, you still have to rebuild all that timing, that trust, and everything that goes into making an offense work. Um, I think that again, I'm not expecting a huge setback, but I'm not. They might be fighting to be bowl eligible this year. It would be my prediction. Um, is there a team in the MAC that we haven't talked about yet that you want to talk about before we move on?
No, I think that just I guess with my predictions, I think that Buffalo could be a sneaky team. Just in if they are able to kind of have a great season and then get that win against Ohio. But other than that, not really.
Yeah. The team I was going to talk about, you brought up as your conference winning pick. I went with Eastern Michigan. They were just, I just wanted to talk about them because they were so much fun to watch last year. They upset Arizona State on the road. That got Herm Edwards fired from Arizona State. They were a 3-point loss to Toledo away from making the MAC championship game. And I think they are primed to do it again. They have never made 3 consecutive bowl games in school history. If they were able to get bowl eligible this year, that'll make 3 straight. They've also won, I believe, 2 straight bowl or I think it was they never won back-to-back bowl games, so that's another goal for them this season as well. Um, but, um, they did lose their star QB, Taylor Powell, but, Austin Smith, excuse me, I got him confused with NASCAR racer. Austin Smith, um, played there last year. He actually led, Eastern Michigan to the upset over Arizona State, so he has quality playing time. I think that they are an outside dark horse pick to be the group of 6 or group of 5 representative, for the New Year's Six bowl. So I just talked about Ohio. They haven't won since 1968. Eastern Michigan hasn't won since 1987. That's the MAC conference. So, a lot of fun storylines happening in the MAC this year, and like I said, I love me some Tuesday night football, so I'm excited for that to come back. Let's go over to the Mountain West. One of the more interesting conferences last year, just with the turnover up and down that a lot of these teams faced. Who do you have winning the Mountain West this year, Slade?
I went with Air Force. Um, I think that they had a really great end to the season. I mean, I'm going to continue to go back to this, but the end of the season with a 5-game winning streak. I think the fact that they went 10-3, 5-3 in conference, meaning the only 3 losses came in conference. So they really need to focus on those games, especially. I mean, they only lost 1 game at home. If they could just pick up one of those away conference games, I think that they have a really great chance at the season. I think that uh, let me look here. Sorry. I mean, their schedule. I mean, they play Robert Morris first game of the season. Sam Houston State is an away game, which, like you had said, they had a great game last year. Sam Houston State did. Very memorable game. But I think that if they're able to kind of capitalize on some things, I think that they could really make things happen this year. 10-3 last year was a great season. I think that they're just a couple changes away from changing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like Air Force is a team that could possibly go 11-1 with that schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, their hardest game is they travel to Boise State, also
Mm-hmm.
Colorado State, again, who I'm expecting big things out of this year. Um, but then, of course, you have the Army, the Army and Navy games as well.
Yep.
It's always hard fought. Um, but I'm going to go with Boise State to win this year. They fell short last year. They lost to Fresno State in the conference championship game. They do have a difficult non-conference schedule. They go to Washington and they have UCF at home. So 2 schools, 2 Power 5 schools this year, that are definitely going to give them a headache, but also 2 very winnable games. Um, I think they're bringing enough veteran leadership back on the offensive side of the ball. And their defense was one of the best in the country last year, 15th in scoring, 5th in passing defense, 7th in total defense. Um, and their quarterback, Taylor Green, was insane to watch at times last year. So I'm expecting a well balanced team to come out of Idaho this year, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So I'm going to take Boise State to win the conference. Who is your most improved team for 2023 in the Mountain West?
Yeah, I mean, this might be pretty similar based on what you've been saying recently, but Colorado State, I think that they're going to be a greatly improved team. I think, like you had said, they went 3-9 last year with their 3 wins coming in conference, going 3-5. I think that uh, realistically, there's no place but up for them. And with all the great news coming out of there, everything that you've already said, I think that it would be really hard for them not to have like a 9-4 season or something like that, which would be great for their program.
Yeah, absolutely. Jay Norvell is one of the best, underrated head coaches in college football. He's turned around at two programs now. One of them being Nevada, his conference rival. He goes over to Colorado State. Again, 3-9, rough last year, but they went on the road. They played Michigan. It's difficult to take a 51-7 shellacking and then be confident about your season going forward. And then they also play Middle Tennessee State and then Washington State. So not an easy start to the season.
Mhm.
Now this year they do still play Washington State and at Colorado. Uh, I'm very excited for that Colorado game. I think the Buffaloes themselves are still getting their feet under them at that point. This is definitely a game the Rams can go out there and win. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch that game in week 2. Um, just the only thing I wanted to add on top of that, is kind of intriguing. When Jay Norvell took over Nevada, he went 3-9 in his first season, just like Colorado State did. Year 2, he went 8-5. I'm not saying he's going to do that here,
I said 9-4.
yeah, if he's able to get 9-4, 8-5, that would be huge. But even if he can just get them the bowl eligibility,
Hmm.
that would be awesome. Colorado State is pouring a ton of money into this program. They used to be a very proud team, and Steve Adazio went in there, took it over, and ruined that program. Um, and so I think Jay Norvell is putting the work in. They have one of the best stadiums in the Mountain West. Everybody talks about Boise State's blue turf, but
Hmm.
stadium wise, Colorado State is one of the best. And they also just signed a deal. I think all but 2 of the state championship football games are going to be held there. And so that's huge for recruiting. Guys are coming to your campus. They're going to see it. They're going to see the stadium, and that does help a lot in recruiting. And so I think Colorado State is a program on the rise. And 2 or 3 years from now, we could be talking about them being a perennial contender to win the Mountain West title. So I'm excited to see that. Who do you have as your most declined team?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that I'm going with Boise, and just because I think that they're going to have, I mean, they start the season out as 15-point underdog against Washington on the road, and then they go home against UCF, who I think that could be a very close game. Depends on what's going on with UCF's team at the time, but uh, they also play Colorado State, like we had talked about, which I don't know if that'll be as close of a game, but I'm hoping for Colorado State that it is. Um, and I think that playing Fresno State and Arizona State in their last 4 games of the season, both possible losses if they already have 2 losses. I mean, they're still sitting at 10-4 like they were last season, but 3 conference losses would be a big deal, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. From my most, I went from the most disappointing aspect. I went with Utah State. Last year they had a down year again. We talked about it a lot because they played Alabama. They got super beat up, and they just had no momentum going forward from there. But people are expecting them to bounce back this season, thinking that they're going to be back to competing for the conference title. I don't think they're going to be quite there yet. I mean, they have a very difficult schedule in my eyes this year. I don't think Cooper Cooper Legas, is ready. I just don't think he's it. I don't think he's gonna be the guy to lead the Utah State Aggies back to, dominating the Mountain West and competing for the title. He has a lot of, you know, judgment issues, on the field. I'm not talking about anything off the field, but just where to throw the ball and just decision making, and I think that he's gonna be holding them back this season. They travel to Iowa, Air Force, San Jose State, and UConn. It's weird saying, traveling to UConn is going to be a tough game, but after last year, I don't think anything's off the table there. They also have James Madison, Colorado State, Fresno State, and Boise State at home. So I think a super difficult schedule. I think they're going to be fighting to make a bowl game this year. And so I think Utah State is going to live up to the hype I feel like a lot of people are putting into the season. Um, One conference left. It's the Sun Belt Conference. Um, Last year, 2022 was the year of the Sun Belt. They were upsetting Power Five schools left and right. They beat Nebraska, Texas A&M, and then you had the Appalachian State Troy game. College Game Day was there. One of the wildest finishes you'll ever see to a college football game. We thought it was already bad enough week 2 or week 1,
Mm-hmm.
when App State played North Carolina, and that went to overtime after an insane comeback. So all the focus is on the Sun Belt last year. So it'll be interesting to see if it's more of the same this season. First things first, who do you have winning the Sun Belt Conference this year, Slade?
Yeah, so I kind of really thought about this a lot. I think it's gonna be whoever comes out of the West in South Alabama or Troy. Uh, for all intents and purposes, I'm gonna go with South Alabama. I think that they start the season off very rough. Like they play Tulane first game of the season, and they're underdogs already in that game. And then third week of the season they play Oklahoma State. I think that those two games, if they're able, I mean, like if they were able to upset Tulane or even get close with Oklahoma State, it's just a really good stepping ground for the rest of the season. And then they play to Troy later in the season. So if they were able to, get out of there with only 2 losses start of the season, and those be their only 2 losses, I think that would be great for them. And really, obviously, I mean, that would be great for them if they only had 2 losses. I don't know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm going with them.
I went with South Alabama as well, and I want to make it clear: if James Madison was able to win the conference, I would 100% pick James Madison. But I think the Tulane game is going to be a battle for South Alabama. I actually think they upset Oklahoma State on the road, though. I think Oklahoma State is going to have a very down year. We saw them struggle to the ends of last season already, and then they lose Spencer Sanders to the transfer portal. So I think Oklahoma State is going to have a rough start to the season, especially. I think South Alabama is a team that can go to Stillwater and win that game. But if they're able to go 1-1 in that non-conference schedule with those two schools, they also play Southeastern Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
Not worried about that game as much, but when you play in the Sun Belt, you can't take any games off. But I feel like playing at James Madison is going to be the biggest thorn in their side. Aside from that, though, I really feel like getting Marshall at home is a huge help. I have them going 10-3 this year.
Same.
Yeah. So, but I think that's enough for them to win the West, like you said, and I think out of whoever comes out of the West with James Madison not being eligible to play yet, I think the West runs it until that time. Who do you have as your most improved team?
Appalachian State. I kind of went with Appalachian State. I think that we saw such electric TV ratings basically from them to start the season last year. I mean, like you had said, North Carolina, and then that what was the other game against Troy, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and so I mean, it seemed like they were like this amazing team, yet they finished the season 6-6. So I think that them being able to kind of capitalize on that, the fact that they gave up a ton of points last season, and that seemed to be a really big problem for them throughout the season. So I think that if they're just able to kind of capitalize on defense, that they'll be able to really improve this season.
Absolutely. I went with Georgia State. I think they had a brutal start to the season last year. They played at South Carolina. They had North Carolina at home, who they almost upset. And then week 4 was Coastal Carolina. They get a little bit easier schedule to start the year this year. They have Rhode Island, Connecticut, Charlotte, and Coastal Carolina their first 4 games. They returned Darren Granger, who played really well last year, was able to light up the scoreboard. I think if they can just play a little bit better defense, and they can reverse. They had 4 one-score losses last year. If they can flip 2 of those, this is the team that we're talking about being bowl eligible again. So again, not picking them to be, competing at the top of the conference. But I absolutely think that they're going to be a much more improved team and a tough team for a lot of these Sun Belt schools to play. Who do you have as your biggest disappointment or a team that's going to regress from last season?
Um, yeah, so I had also gone with Appalachian State because I think that they have the biggest, like, I don't think that they're going to go 6-6 again. I think that they're either able to kind of turn the table and flip 2-3 of those games and kind of go like 8-4, or they're also able to regress and kind of, I don't know, go 3-9 or something. So
Yeah.
I'm hopeful for them, but I'm also weary of their schedule. I think that they're going to have a coin flip when it comes to their season, which is basically what last year was. They flip a coin, and whoever scored 60 points won the game.
Yeah. I mean, traveling to North Carolina this year, they get East Carolina at home.
Mm-hmm.
2 out of the first 3 games are going to be difficult games for them. So absolutely, it's a coin flip season for them. I actually went with Troy. They lose Gunnar Watson. Or I'm sorry, Gunnar Watson returns, but he's very turnover prone at the QB position. They also lost their top two receivers. They have a difficult schedule. They play Kansas State, James Madison, Western Kentucky, and South Alabama. I think those 4 games are enough to kind of slow their season down and keep them from competing for the West title. So I have Troy kind of finishing a little bit more middle of the pack in the West this year rather than being 1-2 with South Alabama. Uh, Before we wrap up, is there any other team in the Sun Belt that you want to talk about?
No.
I just want to talk about James Madison quick. I mean, we brought them
Yeah.
up enough. If they were eligible, they would probably win the conference for the second year in a row.
Do you want to talk about why they're not eligible?
I do
Do you-
because the NCAA denied their waiver, which I think
Yes.
is BS. And I understand that the rule was put in place to kind of protect these guys from losing so many players to the transfer portal, and hey, you're gonna get it beat up your first 2 years. It's gonna be okay. But the fact that James Madison came in and played it how they played,
Hit the ground running.
yeah. We had them inside our top 25 for a majority of the season last year. Um, for them to get that waiver denied, I thought was just not right. That doesn't sit right with me. I think they should be eligible for the postseason this year. But it is what it is. They were absolutely the most surprising team in all of college football last year. Um, I think they have a realistic chance at their first Power 5 win this season. They play Virginia. Not expecting big things out of Virginia. That's the team that has a lot of rebuilding to do, especially after the tragedy last season. But I think James Madison is primed to get their first Power 5 win. They did lose their star QB, Todd Centino. Excuse me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. But James Madison has just been a factor for years, being the next man up. Hey, this guy's going to come in and he's going to take over. I think that their offense is going to be maybe take a slight step back. But they were inside the top 40 in offensive scoring, passing, rushing, and total offense. Defense was even better. They ranked 24th in scoring, 41st in pass defense, second in rush defense, fifth in total defense. So one of the best defenses in the country. I feel like they return so many guys on that side of the ball. This might be a team that goes undefeated, and we're talking about how much of a travesty it is that they don't get to go to a bowl game, New Year's Six, or even fight for their conference championship. So I'm expecting big things again out of James Madison this season. But that will do it for our Group of 5 season preview. We are super excited to bring you the Power 5 starting next week. We're going to start with the Big Ten. Just because Nick asked us to, and we're going to abide by that. So we're going to start with the Big Ten. Lando will be dressed in his Penn State gear next week. Against my wishes, but he'll be dressed in his Penn State gear next week. But we're super excited, and of course, when the season starts, Out of the Tunnel will return, and we're super excited to do that every Saturday morning with you guys as well. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and we will see you next week to preview the Big Ten. Have a great rest of your guys' day.
Let's go, Landon.